Okay, well, thank you and welcome. My name is Jessica Johnston. I'm an Educations Program Manager with the Ecological Society of America, and I welcome you to today's Water Cooler Chat. Let's talk about interdisciplinary ecology in the Anthropocene. We have 4 great guest speakers with us today, but before we jump into that, I wanted to just briefly cover what the Water Cooler Chat is about and our housekeeping rules. So if you're just joining us, please share your name and affiliation in the chat box. Our water cooler chat process is pretty straightforward. It's an informal discussion with all ideas and experiences welcome. If you want to join the conversation, there are 2 ways you can do that today. You can either raise your digital hand by using the reaction symbol, or you can put your comments in the chat box, and we will get to those as we go through the speakers. We ask that you please keep your mic muted during the session. And if you do have an opportunity to talk, to practice the take space, make space, meaning that if you've already talked, let somebody else share. We are recording this event today, so please feel free to turn off your camera if you don't want to appear in ESA's YouTube video. Okay, that being said, today's host and moderator is Carmen Sid, a professor of ecology and dean at Arts and Science Emerita at Eastern Connecticut State University, and also the chair of the ESA Diversity Committee. So Carmen, take it away.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here today to talk about this program with you. And welcome, global ecological activists. I know all of you out there are in that category, and definitely supporters of elevating the human dimension in ecological research today to address urgent environmental challenges of the Anthropocene. So connection to the interdisciplinary ecology in the Anthropocene title of this program. As you heard, I'm Carmen Sid. I'm the founding chair of the new Ecological Society of America Diversity Committee, started in 2021 as a response to the recommendations of the ESA Task Force on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice issues that was set up in 2020. So the task force recommended this committee be started, and it also gathered information from the membership, and the membership clamored for a support program for early and mid-career ecologists. And that's what you're going to be experiencing today, the second cohort of this program, which we call the Excellence in Ecology Scholars program. So we have 2 purposes to the water cooler chat. One is to introduce you to this program. It also started in 2021. It's a comprehensive support program we provide for 2 years. The society provides funding for travel expenses to go to the annual meeting, research, and publication costs. Very important now as we go into the era of open access. And the research that our scholars are doing, our diverse scholars, is actually unique in that it is concentrated on integrating the social and the ecological components into their research. They're really dealing with real world problems of today. And this is exactly what we want everyone to do, but not all of us have the capability to do that or the wherewithal to go and tackle it. So that's why we're showcasing these scholars. The new program is on the way still. We have 2 cohorts, and we're now choosing the 3rd cohort next week. So after that, we will need to get to have more money to support these programs. And so for that, the second purpose of today's program, online program, is to engage you, the very important audience, in spreading the word about today's diverse and excellence in ecology scholars, to generate attention to the need to provide this program beyond 3 cohorts. We have started an endowment fund. You can see the screen there. There's a QR code. That's the QR code for the donation for this endowment fund. It's called the Equity and Excellence in Ecology Endowment Fund. We have interest from a lot of people, and we have about 112,000 already going in the fund. We got to get up to 400,000 so we can keep this program going in perpetuity. So please use all your social media skills. I know you have plenty, and spread the word. If you get $5 from each of the people you hit through social media, we're going to get the money there. There are many people who will benefit from this program, not just the scholars, because these are people who go out of their way to connect to the communities of color throughout the world, not just here or locally, but throughout the world, and actually tackle these problems. At the same time, they serve as great role models to our students of color who are getting into the system and need to see people like themselves doing research. So we expect you, the mavens of social media, to be spreading the word and allowing us to continue this program in perpetuity. So let me start now by introducing our speakers very briefly, and then I'll start with the first speaker. You've got Dr. Karen Bailey, who's at the University of Colorado Boulder, Dr. Adoloye Ofonumbere, who's right now at the University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And we will have Dr. Nikki Traylor-Knowles from the University of Miami, and Dr. Bruno Suarez, who is at the University of Regina in Canada. Your questions are most important today as the audience. So we're going to leave enough time for that important dialogue after all the speakers have presented. So let's start with Dr. Karen Bailey, and she's going to talk about understanding human decisions in conservation landscapes and changing climates. Come on, Karen.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks so much for the award. Happy to be sharing the virtual space with you all today. So I'm gonna be, we don't have a ton of time. So I was thinking the best way to sort of talk about the ways in which I think about both interdisciplinary approaches to ecology and understanding this in the context of the Anthropocene are just to kind of give you a smattering of examples of interdisciplinary research that have really been thinking about the sort of socio-ecological reality in many places where I have worked and continued to work. And I think at the core of this, and I think the sort of soapbox that I stand on, and that kind of lands where I situate our work and where I'm thinking about where ecology should be going as a field, is really breaking out of our silos, our disciplinary silos, our sectoral silos. I think in many ways they hinder our ability to think creatively, to think inclusively, and to think sustainably about a lot of the challenges that ecology is facing. And so I would argue that if we're to achieve any of our sort of desired ecological or environmental goals in ways that are just, equitable, effective, and sustainable, we can't think of our research as only relevant to a single discipline. And so a lot of my approach, I was trained as an ecologist and then experienced a significant drought in Southern Africa while doing my dissertation research on small mammals, and decided that I wanted to shift my focus and study humans and their relationships to the environment in more robust kind of systems, holistic ways. And that really informs, I think, the work that I do now, and particularly what I felt was missing or was excluded from a lot of my ecology training in my undergraduate and graduate degrees. So that said, I just really want to talk about some of the ways that I've been thinking about these kind of interacting or intersecting challenges of climate change, land use change, ecological resilience, and social resilience together. So the first project I want to talk about is really aimed at linking climate adaptation. Again, I was talking about my experience in Southern Africa, experiencing drought on the landscape, which has really informed my thinking around climate adaptation and resilience, and particularly water. And so this figure here, and I try to include all the papers that I'm referencing with these examples, is really looking at some of our strategies for adapting to climate change, particularly buyouts or managed retreat, protecting or removing property that's prone to flooding, and then floodplain protection, so removing or preventing development in areas of floodplains, and really just starting to think about what are the equity implications of some of these things. How might we be approaching these issues from a single lens of climate adaptation, and at the same time disenfranchising or doing unintentional harm to some of the communities where these buyouts and floodplain protections are happening. And so there's a lot, way too much to talk about in terms of what's happening in this research, but the key takeaway is that the strategies we propose is removing those silos, right? Is thinking about not only how much land has been protected from flooding or from damage due to future flooding, but also what are the economic implications of these types of protections, for example, or how are we disconnecting community members from other community members or individuals from their own sense of connection to a landscape when we are facilitating these managed retreat type efforts. And so really the goal here is to take a more holistic approach and really try and operationalize equity and justice in the planning around flood adaptation and flood mitigation. The next example that I want to talk about is trying to explicitly link human well-being goals and human health and well-being goals and conservation goals. And so a lot of my work has been with communities outside of protected areas in Southern and East Africa. And so that's where some of this work comes from. And really our goal here was to try to understand, and it's a really highly collaborative project in the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area in Southern Africa, which is really important for elephant conservation in addition to other great migrations, really just trying to understand how the different compounding factors of land use change, climate change, and sharing the landscape with wildlife, particularly leading to things like crop predation, are leading to compounding threats to human communities and human landscapes there. And so really, again, thinking about how we can holistically, by working with social scientists, geographers, climatologists, ecologists, et cetera, really trying to understand the system as a whole and start to point to what are the key leverage points for addressing some of these challenges related to sharing landscapes with wildlife, particularly in low and middle income country settings. So this was some work published relatively recently, and really this figure shows just the relative impact of things like how much farmland you own, where your income is coming from, what your different sources of income might be, and different causes or drivers of crop predation influencing food security in particular. And what the takeaway here is that crop predation, it was one of the most significant negative predictors of food security in the landscape compared to some of the other things that you might think are particularly relevant. So thinking about some of these challenges from both the conservation perspective and the human health and well-being perspective is a key theme. The last thing I want to touch on is really doing what it takes to link the field of ecology to the broader societal conditions that influence inequity and injustice. So this paper here is titled "Pays to Gets Paid: Factors Influencing Wildlife-Related Employment Success," and really came out of a discussion around the prevalence of unpaid positions in the field of ecology and wildlife conservation, and how that could potentially serve as a barrier to people from underserved backgrounds thriving in fields of ecology and conservation. So we did kind of a relatively large scale survey of folks with wildlife related degrees, as we called them, to understand, how many unpaid positions versus paid positions did you have? What are the skills that you gained from those positions, and how has that influenced your ability to persist in the field? And one of the more interesting unexpected takeaways, which is shown in this table here, is the fact that the relationship between skills that you actually obtain from a position starts to get really nebulous and starts to fall apart a bit when you're talking about an unpaid position versus a paid position. So you're seeing here different skills that we identified: field techniques, data analysis and management, outreach, scientific writing, research design. And for all of the paid positions, the more you had, the more you got those skills. For the unpaid positions, you can see there's only positive relationships for some of the skills that we highlighted. And so really, in addition to the inequity inherent in saying, in order to thrive in this field, you have to be able to work for free, we're also finding that maybe the positions that we have set up this way are not actually facilitating the skills that we know you need to be successful in the field. The second example of sort of linking ecology to society comes from really just our work around exploring the experiences of people from underrepresented background, people of color, folks with disabilities, queer members of queer community, all of these intersecting marginalized identities. And really just the reality of doing ecology, particularly doing field ecology as a member of a marginalized background. And so I'm not going to read the whole of this box here, but it's from a very young ecologist who, their first time being in the field, was called a racial slur, and no one around her did anything. And how we can ask people to persist in these systems despite the harsh reality of what you might experience doing field work, both domestically and abroad as members of a sort of marginalized background. And so really, with these two examples, we're trying to more critically scrutinize societal conditions that influence people's ability to persist and thrive as ecologists. I think I'm low on time, so I'll wrap up here and just sort of implore you to think about, when we're thinking about interdisciplinarity, when we're thinking about the Anthropocene, and when we're thinking about the field of ecology, the things that we can and possibly should be doing are collaborate across disciplines, across silos, with practitioners, with people in the governance space. Think at a systems level and really try not to exclude different parts of a system when possible. Conduct research with a goal of serving the communities that we exist in, and learn and train in other fields. So I will stop there and excited to hear the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Karen. That was a great, exciting start. And now I would like to bring up our next speaker, Dr. Araloye Ofonumbere, who's right now at the University of Port Harcourt in Nigeria. Unmute.
Can't believe you can hear me now.
Yes.
All right. I wish to thank you for this opportunity to showcase my research work, and also welcome everybody on board that are part of this chat. I think Ecological Society of America has been an association that has helped to promote diversity, and I'm so happy to be part of this forum. And those of us in Africa, we want to also let you know that we are doing some little ecology in this part of the world. And my research work is mostly in mangrove environment. I'm a mangrove ecologist. So my talk today is the mangrove serving as the food basket, especially in Africa. And the mangroves in Nigeria, as we all know, is the third largest mangrove forest in the world, and also the largest mangrove forest in Africa. Now, the mangrove forest is a kind of vegetation that plays a lot of role, which if I start to list it out, I won't have enough time to list all of them out. But specifically, mangroves are known as the major carbon sequesters. We know what is happening, climate change, global warming. So, but the mangrove forest does that better by absorbing carbon dioxide and also storing it in their biomass and also the soil. But today, we are going to look at the role it plays. There are a lot of ecosystem services it renders to the environment. But basically, in Africa, the mangrove forest is attached to the people because a lot of people, local people, derive the nutritional benefits from the mangroves. And we know that mangroves serve as a haven, or more or less a habitat for a lot of fishery. Aquatic organisms, you have the shell organisms, you also have the fin organisms. They're all having the spawning area in the mangrove forest. Now, I will give you a little statistics to just demonstrate how rich the mangrove forest in Nigeria and Africa is. Like particularly in Nigeria, if we talk about plants, there are about 4,600 plant species. 4,600 plant species. Then when you talk about mammals, and most of these species are found in coastal areas, we have those that are found in aquatic and terrestrial environments. But I'm talking about Nigeria alone. I'm not even talking about Africa. We have over 4,600 species. Then for mammals, we have about 274 species of mammals, 274. And every day we are discovering new species. And that's why research in Africa and Nigeria especially is growing, because every day you keep seeing some new species, maybe through process of hybridization, or maybe sometimes most of these species wouldn't have been discovered, but we keep discovering these species. Then we also have the birds. We have about 839 species of birds, 839. Then amphibians, 19. Then the invertebrates, they are uncounted, there are millions that we have. But specifically, we have some species that are found, like the fish. We have the invertebrates. We have the barnacles, the prawns. And the local people in Africa, they dwell on these organisms in terms of food for nutritional value and also for economic purpose, because most of them, they are the local fisher folks. Once they get down to these areas, the wetland areas, the mangrove areas, they are able to get a lot of these organisms harvested, and most of them are sold to make money to feed their family. Then some of them too feed on them, which provide their nutritional needs, especially protein that is gotten from fish. Then also the mangrove is also used as to produce firewood. In Nigeria, we have basically 3 dominant species of mangrove. We have the red mangrove, the rhizophora, we have the white mangrove, the Avicennia germinans, and we have the black mangrove, Laguncularia racemosa. Now, out of these species, the red mangrove is the most dominant, and the red mangroves produce firewood, what locally is used in producing charcoal. Now, the firewood is a multi-million dollar business, because most of these natives, once they get these woods, they sell it and also make a lot of money from that. But there's a lot of caution in that area because of deforestation. And presently, those of us in ecology, we are calling for selective logging, so it will not lead to widespread deforestation. Then also the charcoal that is derived from the firewood is used for cooking. Like most people don't use like gas in developed areas where you use gas and so on. They use charcoal to cook. They use to smoke their fish, like grilling, what we call grilling in America. They used to grill it, and they also use it to cook their food. So we have these organisms that are captured in mangrove area, providing a source of livelihood for the local people. So, and that's why we describe it as the food basket, because most of them, the problem we're having now is human development, habitat loss. All these things now are affecting the mangrove forests. In fact, our studies show that about 25% of the mangrove forests have been wiped out because unregulated cut logging and deforestation has resulted to massive deforestation. And if this thing continues, the prediction is that in the next 50 years, we may not have this mangrove forest anymore. And imagine the mangrove forest going, which is a major carbon sequester. You know what will happen, which means there will be climate change. The impact of climate change will increase. And we already have started seeing the impact, sea level rise. Like here in Africa, there are a lot of the coastal areas are expanding because of the rise in sea level. So the mangroves play a critical role in the environment, and not only in the environment, and also plays major role in the life of the average local citizen in Africa. Therefore, my presentation today is to bring to attention the importance of mangrove forests. We know that the mangrove forests are distributed globally. We have them in Florida, we have them in Australia, we have them in China, we have them in Indonesia, but that of Africa is the one that not only serves environmental purpose, but also serve for nutritional purpose, because most of the organisms captured and used as food, they are found in the mangrove forests. So actually, I would have showed some slide. I have about, in fact, my slide is about 40, but I will not go into that. It will take my time. So, but I believe, hopefully, when the questions will come, I can, since I have limited time to make this presentation, I can maybe flesh out some of the things I've mentioned. But I just want to let us know that there are different species, multiple species of mangrove. Even up to now, we're trying to even classify them taxonomically for us to know the proper groups to place them. So the mangrove actually have a key role in the food chain. And we know that in ecosystem, the food chain is important. Both the invertebrates, the vertebrates, they all are found in the mangrove environment. And they form a kind of network that once the mangrove are gone, there will be dislocation in terms of the trophic level, that is the food chain. So mangroves are critical in the environment of Africa. So at this point, I'm going to pause and allow us to, ask some questions, which I'm going to give you some information concerning just the little points I've given. But I know I have a lot of things to say, but because of time, I'm going to stop at this point. And I really appreciate you for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adoloye. We will be having all the questions at the end. People from all over the world are already saying, yeah, we got the same problems in our mangroves in the Philippines. So this is definitely a global audience, and wonderful to have that. So we're moving on to a marine ecosystem person, Dr. Nikki Traylor Knowles, who's based at the University of Miami. There you are.
Hi.
Oh, you're talking about corals, coral immunity and saving corals. And boy, do we need help.
Yes, I'm just going to quickly get my screen up. Do you all see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll just be going through this really quick, and I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak about some of the work that I'm doing in my laboratory and what we're thinking about in terms of corals and coral immunity, and how that actually fits into ecological issues. So the area that what really inspires me is sort of what the complexity of corals. And I think that's what a lot of us here, if we study coral reefs, we're interested in the ecosystems that we see here. But if we actually zoom in to a coral, it itself as an animal is an ecosystem. And that's what has been really interesting to me, is that there's ways in which to look at this from a broader perspective of the reef and actually apply and understand some of the interactions that we see from a cellular level within corals. And so my lab is really focused on a lot of different areas within, mainly within immunity, but we're really interested in trying to understand how we can use cell biology and tools in cell biology to inform ecological decisions, and also act as a way in which to develop monitoring systems and biomarker systems to help coral reefs. And so really this is sort of the core of it, the idea being that, we have all these different corals. We can develop markers in which to identify and understand the immune function or the microbial partners that exist within the corals, understand their health status, and then be able to develop these cell-based therapies. So this is something that we're working really hard on, and we're taking a lot of different approaches to doing this, because we're really in a situation right now where we're dealing with a lot of stress in the corals, and I'll talk about that in a second. But at the core of all this is really understanding the coral immune system and being able to harness what we know, as well as harnessing new technologies and discovery to actually use these different things to assess and understand the coral immune system. So the areas that my lab really focuses on are in particular coral cells. And in fact, my lab and collaborators, we only discovered 2 years ago functionally that corals have immune cells. So this is something that we've been very focused on as a way in which to develop markers and targets for understanding the coral health, because many times we don't understand if a coral is sick or not until it's almost dead. And so this is really a way in which to kind of start monitoring on a larger scale the coral health. Additionally, we have been developing and using what's called single cell sequencing of the RNA of the coral host, as well as the symbiont partners, to identify targets and start to be able to identify the different cell populations and what they're doing, and be able to start to target those different cell populations with different therapeutics. So it's really kind of an intersection of almost medical science with ecology-based work as a way, again, in which to inform the crisis that corals are currently facing. And additionally, the other area that we're really excited about is developing and enriching for stem cell markers in different species of corals, with the idea being that we'd be able to do actual stem cell therapy in corals as a way to help confer resiliency in the face of climate change, or confer disease resistance, for example. Because this is a huge challenge with these animals that can't actually swim away from, a danger, swim away from areas that are polluted or really hot. And so, we're trying to work on trying to buy these animals a little extra time so that in the future we do actually have coral reefs. And in particular, right now, I'm located in Miami, Florida, and we're really dealing with a lot of different stressors and diseases right now. So, for example, this chart here is showing the spread of what's called stony coral tissue loss disease. This disease started, or was first noted, in 2014 after the dredging of the Miami port. And since that point, it has actually spread all throughout Florida. So showing where that red line is moving into Dry Tortugas National Park. And now it has actually spread all the way through the Caribbean. And what's so scary about this disease and terrifying is that it affects over 22 different species of coral. So there are a lot of different corals that are being affected by this. We don't know what's causing it, except that it is waterborne, and it is suspected that it may be viral in origin or possibly bacterial, or a combination of the two. And so there's a lot of investigating to try to understand what is going on with this disease. And my laboratory is really looking at the immune system of these corals to understand if the susceptibility is linked to their immune function. And can we actually use the immune system as a marker for health with corals that are in the face of these diseases? The other thing is that really right now, at this very moment, we're experiencing this unprecedented heat wave here in Florida and in the Caribbean. And I didn't actually have a chance to update this. This has actually been, this I think was from July when I got it. So now that we're in September, the line is actually all the way up to, I think, 20 or 22 degree heating weeks. They actually had to change the legend of this chart to accommodate for how much heat we've actually had. So this is unprecedented what we're seeing. And in fact, in some areas, we've been seeing that corals have been exposed to temperatures as high as 100 degrees, 102 degrees in these nearshore areas. So many of the corals are just boiling to death. They're not even bleaching. And so this is another huge challenge that we're faced with, and really trying to work with the different practitioners and people who are, doing this restoration work to help inform the corals that do survive, because there are some corals on the reef that are able to withstand maybe not all the heat, but some of the heat, and try to understand what is going on with these corals. Is there something special genetically about them? Is there something about their microbial ecology that may be giving them the ability to withstand some of this? But we really are in this crisis situation where they're actually having to take corals literally out of the ocean and put them onto land-based nurseries to save them. So there is this great, really big challenge of being able to apply unique and maybe even kind of strange technologies to corals, because I really feel that as ecologists, we can't just document death anymore with them. We actually have to start making some changes. And while we're waiting for the rest of the world to catch up with changing the climate policy that we currently have. So with that, I just want to thank the ESA Excellence in Ecology Scholarship, and happy to take any questions or talk more about coral reefs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Trailer Knowles. Every time you talk about the corals being boiled to death, it just grabs me, and I said, my God, we must do something quick. So many questions to come on that, but let's do one more wonderful Excellence in Ecology Scholar presentation from Dr. Bruno Suarez, who's based at the University of Regina in Canada. On mute.
Forgot about that as well. Thank you, Carmen. So hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. A lot of people is here right now, and it's great to hear my colleagues from the EEE again as well. Today I might take a little, maybe a different approach from my colleagues. And I'm going to talk about more larger scales and how to build large data sets in a more actable manner. It's going to take a while to get there, so just bear with me. I was going to talk about my new research here in the University of Regina, which is entitled Natural and Anthropogenic Determinants of the Structure of the Freshwater Food Webs. So in contrary for my colleagues, I'm a new PI, so I'm off maybe for 5 months, so I don't have a lot of things that is already in final form and a lot of papers on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit of what I'm going to do here and what I'm doing right now here in my new position. So focusing on freshwater ecosystems, well, we know they are important components of the landscape, and they provide diverse ecosystem services, including water quality control, nutrient cycling, fishing stocks, and all of those are beneficial to the development of a human society. And these benefits, they depend on the food webs, which are the prey-predator networks of species interacting to different degrees that control the flux of energy and matter within the ecosystem. Generally, the structure, the properties of the food webs, they are scale dependent on the number of species in the communities and the number of connections they made among them, suggesting somewhat of a fundamental organization of those food webs, basically based on those numbers. Nonetheless, when we increase our resolution and our sample coverage, we can see that food webs, their fine-grained structure is dependent on the environmental variation and functional traits of species that are composing the communities. In other words, natural and anthropogenic variation that alter the habitat characteristics and the community composition will change the structure and the function of these networks. And if we can have an improved understanding of the relative importance of those two different factors that structure the food webs, we can better understand and predict the ecosystem services that are associated with them. So in my new research program, I will be synthesizing published and unpublished information, especially focused on the regulatory effects of fishes in different freshwater ecosystems across the globe by analyzing their trophic networks. I chose fishes as study models because they are very diverse, and we have a lot of abundant information that allow the development of global database to study those interactions. And as I say, they are very diverse, both in terms of number of species, but also functionally. and they are key members of food webs in a wide range of habitats and ecosystems, comprising multiple trophic guides and being key species in some of those systems. So in the short term, I am to uncover how large-scale environmental changes and community composition changes control the food web structure. So in the long term, we can create a framework to predict the food web structure and its functioning from those more easily taken variables, both environment variables and community composition. So for doing that, in the next 5 years, I expect to address two main topics. The first one is to uncover the geographic determinants of the trophic networks of freshwater fish assemblages. So environmental difference across large scales, such as altitude or urbanization rate, they lead to structural difference in food web organization by changing prey composition, how species interact with each other, and the main sources of energy of the systems. So this project will ultimately assess the importance of several environmental variables for food web structure and functioning in large scales, allowing us to understand how future changes in those variables may shape those food webs. Then I will try to determine how predator diversity is related to the food webs. So the effective linkage of two species, if they are preying, if a predator is preying on a prey, and their interaction strength are essential components of food web structure. And those two factors, they are to some extent related to functional traits of the species and the evolutionary lineages that species are. So this can indicate that functional and phylogenetic diversity measures can translate food web properties as well. So what I'll be doing is to quantify the relationship between taxonomic, functional, and phylogenetic diversity with food web properties to assess the potential for predicting the structure and function of food webs based on community level descriptors, which are far more easy to quantify. And finally, we get into the maybe interdisciplinary thing, or the elevating the human dimension. So it took some time. So for doing that, I need to first build a global database, and a real global database, and not a global database that mostly depicts the global north, mainly Europe and North America. So what I want to create first to reach those goals is to develop a systematic, open, and broad database on fish-trophic interactions in freshwaters that will enable answering both my questions, but also other broad-scale ecological questions, such as niche evolution in freshwater fishes. So the database will be designed, actually is being designed right now collaboratively, using a working group of specialists in different topics, such as freshwater ecology, fish biology, and food webs. And datasets will encompass both published information, but also unpublished data that this consortium will provide on the trophic interactions of individual fishes, populations, or communities in pristine and also disturbed freshwater ecosystems. And well, finally, I said that it would take some time. So finally, I got my take here today on elevating the human dimension in this kind of work. So to me, I've been doing a little bit of meta-analysis or systematic reviews in the last couple of years. And it is important to me to do this in a fair and equitable manner that can advance the interests of different people, different groups of researchers. And from what I've observed, and I've done this as well. So these large systematic reviews, they often extract the data from several primary articles published in local low impact factor journals, and then they publish in high profile journals. This means that the publishing gains and resources that were spent in producing those two different kind of researches are very imbalanced. Primary data papers include a lot of field work and funding. They require a lot of funding, which might pose problems, especially in the global south, where the resources are scarce. And half of the times they are less cited and published in more regional or local venues. And when gathering the data for large-scale meta-analysis, often people just go to the papers and take the information that is available there because it's published information. So anyone can use at least the R coefficients and other kind of information that's are in the paper. And then they can spend less money, less time than a lot of data points that are there. I'm not saying it is easy. I'm just saying that it is less. And then publish in high-profile journals. And to me, this undervalues the expertise of those doing the local and regional work and their efforts to maintain these sampling efforts and large monitoring networks, even, especially in remote areas. Also, this might put them in more fragile positions in the long term, since funding acquisition will depend on how people publish. And this might jeopardize their future efforts to keep doing their work, like sampling their work there or monitoring wildlife there. So the way I think it is fairer and that I'm trying to do right now is by multilateral cooperation. So including information and people from different places and backgrounds, and always trying to include the people that spend their resources to produce that in primary information. This means that I should spend more time being a good hub between different people, that I should find time and allocate time and resources for being that hub, and finding funds from, especially in those places that have been accumulating a lot of funding, is a lot of money for centuries, assessing collaboratively with everyone where we need to focus more of our available resources for a global understanding in our topic, and then directing the funds in that direction. So yeah, that's the kind of the message that I have today. Thank you for listening to me, and also I'm looking for students, so let me know.
Thank you, Bruno Suarez. And I know you people have questions out there because you've already been expressing them in your chat messages. So please come up and let us communicate what you need to talk about. Okay, Stephanie Morningstar.
Sego, Grego. Hi, everybody. Stephanie Morningstar. I'm a PhD student at the State University of New York, College of Environmental Sciences and Forestry in Onondaga Territory. I am a Mohawk Turtle Clan environmental researcher, and I'm working on a project. This is just perfect. Thank you so much for all of your wealth of knowledge and how it all is so interrelated and interdependent. I'm sorry, my husband's mowing the lawn. I hope you can't hear that. My work is really entangled with a lot of what you're talking about, specifically with the economic approaches that you're noting, and specifically using the free labor of our communities to engage for many, many reasons. From my perspective, it's working with traditional ecological knowledge, Northeastern traditional ecological knowledge, to sort of rely on the free labor of Indigenous peoples to Turtle Island to co-manage intact forest lands. And I'm curious to know, sort of the crux of my dissertation is a quote by somebody named Glenn Coulthard. And he basically states, for Indigenous nations to live, capitalism must die. And for capitalism to die, we need Indigenous alternatives to it. And that's really what we're looking at here. Is that what I'm learning is that a lot of the uptake of traditional ecological knowledge is waning, and it's correlated to the economic impacts or the economic need of engaging in a capitalist system, and sort of going more for the extractive perspective or extractive approach versus regenerative or sustainable approach to managing intact forest lands or other ecosystems. I'm just curious to know if anybody, without, I know we don't have a lot of time, do you have Indigenous alternatives that you've been gleaning from that you're seeing that are working in your fields? And thanks again, and thanks in advance if you have an answer. Or papers to point me to, anything.
And just to clarify, when you say Indigenous alternatives, are you referring to like research approaches, funding mechanisms, knowledge generate. I guess I'm not quite sure the alternative, or like alternatives to capitalism, which like that's a
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. Indigenous alternatives to surviving, like to maintaining our ecosystems using traditional ecological knowledge that are that survive outside of the Western capitalist framework. So those indigenous economies that are cyclical, circular, feeding back into and not feeding into, say, things that will be a detriment to the land versus being a positive impact on community in a regenerative way.
I don't know if anyone has an answer to that. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. It's a big and broad and difficult and challenging question, as you know. Of course, I think myself and likely many others on the call are trying to do the work to better educate ourselves on Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being in a way that's not extractive or exploitative. And I think that there are many systems, right, including economic systems, including academic systems that limit and hinder our ability to do that in an effective way. And so, yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer except to say that I'm actively seeking out partnerships in sort of just and non-extractive ways with different tribal and indigenous communities, and learning about different approaches to not only research but also sort of living and being. So yeah, I don't think that's a great answer, but I think for most of us, it's a lot of learning, unlearning, and self-reflection.
And for many of the systems that we're hearing about today, it's local knowledge is a collective knowledge for many people who have lived there. So more than the original, it's a little different, but there's a lot of local knowledge. So we don't want to discount that. Go ahead, Bruno, you were going to talk.
Yeah, I was just going actually to add some examples in the Amazon, which is mostly of my experience in fisheries in the Amazon. And I mean, I was born there, and studied there for a long time. And we do have a lot of interesting study cases that has been happening with managing better the aquatic resources there. There is I'm gonna just write here, Mamirawa, which is a community-based community-based management of important fish species, and that we use a lot in the Amazon for both subsistence and also commercial. And there is a very strong linkage between some institutions, ecological and biodiversity-based institutions, and the local communities to build really good management of those areas in the Amazon. And that includes also indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge of the communities that are based there for some centuries.
Adeloye, I know you have to deal with, you have to unmute. Unmute.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick out the question.
It's the use of the local knowledge of the natives of the area, and you have so many different tribes going on at the same time there, so operating in the same space. So how does that work in helping your research?
Okay, yes, I think like in this part of Nigeria, Niger Delta, mostly Africa, native knowledge is we can't do, as scientists, we can't do without doubt, because they live there and they breathe the air there, they do everything there in the local environment. So there are certain things the locals know that we scientists don't know. And that's why most times in an environmental study, we always do what we call survey research. And that survey research means you have to do like a questionnaire, you have to do oral interview, because if you want to really get what is happening, you have to get information from them, because you are not sleeping in that community. They sleep there, they eat there, they do everything there. So most times we ask this aspect of our research where you can interview them orally to get those local knowledge. Then you also do questionnaire survey to get information from them. And based on the research you do, you can also do a kind of linkage between the local knowledge and what you have already done in your laboratory. So you'll be able to get the right information. For me, I call it like a ground truthing, because no matter what we do far away in our comfortable labs, you have to also know that you get information from them. And that's why I look at it in a way that sometimes you take the lab to the forest. You know, you don't just stay in a cozy environment with air conditioner, you do your experiments and so on. So most times you go there and you get a lot of information from these locals. And the kind of information they will give you will really help to promote your research work. So in the study of mangroves, you can't do without local knowledge, because they've been living there, and based on historical data, in Africa we have what they call like traditional means of passing information. You may not have it in a book or recorded somewhere, but information is passed on from one generation to another. Their grandparents tell the parents tell their children. And once there's a disconnect, you see that most of this information will be lost. So I think it's an area I think I should be thinking about now, if we can actually document it for future purpose, because most times they speak the native language. So if you don't understand, they don't understand English. So if you can't relate with them in terms of their local language or dialect, you won't understand what they're saying. But because of modernization, most of those guys are coming to the city, and most of them can't speak the language. So most times we have this disconnect somewhere. But I think the local knowledge, we can't do without that, especially for mangroves. You will get a lot of information about. In fact, most of the mangroves have native names. They may not tell you in English, but they can give you all the species, no matter how many they are. Even if there are 100, they have their native names. So I think hopefully in future, we're going to catalog the native names and also look for the English names so people can benefit from those local information. Thank you.
Thank you, Adeloye. Do we have one more question out there? Jessica say we got 2 minutes to go.
Yeah, we can run a little over as long as the speakers are okay with that, but I want to be respectful of people's time. I do see a couple of questions in the chat. There's one from Letta Nanducci. Do you hope that more STEM disciplines will adopt a more interdisciplinary approach to their research and teaching spaces? What drew you to doing research at the nexus of science, then environment, community, and society? Do you feel you have to strongly advocate for the value of this perspective within STEM spaces? Well, that's a big question for 2 minutes, or now a minute, but yeah.
I can just take a quick shot at it. That I think with the work that I've always done has been pretty interdisciplinary, and has always been sort of on the fringes of different fields. And for a long time, that was actually viewed as not being good. But I have decided as part of my work to actually highlight that as a strength, because I think being able to look at things from a different perspective is what we need, particularly in conservation spaces, and being able to have diverse voices at the table. So to me, that interdisciplinary approach is key. And in this day and age, we can't do this work without that, in my opinion. Just quickly, do I feel you have to strongly advocate for the value of this perspective within spaces of STEM? It depends. Yeah, I think spaces like this, no, but other spaces, absolutely. And you're having to sort of teach people what is the value of diversity in science? What is the value of diverse opinions and diverse ways of innovation? And so there is still, I think, a large hill to climb, so to speak, with this, but I am positive about new things that are happening and the work that I'm seeing done in other places, that this is starting to be valued more and starting to understand that we can't do science without these kind of crosstalk and human dimension within our work. So yeah.
Okay, well, I think we are officially out of time. So I want to say a quick thank you to Carmen for hosting and moderating this session today, and also a very deep thanks to the 4 guest speakers that we have. I think this is all very interesting stuff, a little bit over my head, but honestly, I think that's what's awesome about it.
I am so thankful you keep to the audience because you represent what we're here to work on. And these speakers are just a handful of many people like that within our society who are making a difference. And they have so much expertise to share. Please reach out to them in some way, especially at the annual meeting. Anyway, great to see you all. Thank you.